Just so you guys know, my name is Alan East. I'm the festival programmer at the Desperado LGBTQ Film Festival. And so we have quite 4 other people here who are involved in the program, and Julie is going to get us started. But thanks for being here.
Of course.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Julie Roberts. I'm basically an activist and a community organizer here in Arizona, and I've been working with Desperado since year 3. I figured it out last night. So I love these guys. I love what they do, and I loved your film. It's amazing. Just a little side note, I am from Oklahoma. I have seen the Tulsa Opera many, many times, and my cousin is in the chorus of this production.
Who is your cousin?
Her name is Karina Van Horn.
I'm sure that we met Karina, and what a small world it is.
Isn't that amazing? Yes, I saw her in one of the shots in the final end with the rehearsals, and then I thought that's got to be her. And then I looked at the credits, and dong dong, there she was. So I called her and told her all about it. She was so excited that we were doing the film here. So thank you for doing that, and thank you for bringing my family into it.
Well, thank you for letting your family be in it. I hope we caught our good side.
She was very pleased with what happened. So I'll get more details later, but still. Right. So anyway, we're going to start it out. I'm going to ask the first question as soon as I let everybody introduce themselves. I think that's the important thing first. I'll ask the first question, let the 2 of you answer, or one of you, and then I'm going to turn the whole moderating over to Michael Soto, who is the Executive Director for Equality Arizona, which is our LGBT equality organization. Yes. Yeah, it's just fabulous. I used to work for them, and I worked with Michael in the past, so I'm so excited to have him on the call with us. Thanks, Michael. Okay, so let everybody introduce themselves first off, and then can we start with you, Michael?
Sure, absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Michael Soto, and I'm the Executive Director of Equality Arizona. I'm so thrilled to be here today with this amazing panel to talk about this incredible film. It was beautiful, and I'm so excited to talk about trans representation with you all and just this incredible, groundbreaking film.
Okay. Erica, can you go next?
Yeah, I'm Erica Kepler. I've been working with Desperado for several years now, and also involved in a lot of things around the Phoenix trans community, sport groups, political groups, things like that over the years.
Okay, and Rachel?
Hi, I'm Rachel, and I'm a composer and musician, and I've been really involved in the GLBTQ community, as I am, and I'm really thrilled to be here. Thanks.
Okay, and James, if you wouldn't mind saying a little bit about yourself?
Yes, my name is James Kicklighter. I'm the director of The Sound of Identity, and I am just thrilled to be able to share it with audiences in Arizona, so thank you for having us.
Okay, and John, would you like to introduce yourself too?
Sure, yeah, I'm John Pope. I'm the director of photography for the film, and thanks for having us.
Okay, good. Okay, the first question, I hope this will start us off on a good foot, and then I'm gonna once we all finish with that, I'm gonna let Michael take the lead on this. How did you find this story? How did you find Lucia? And how did you make it happen? I know it's big, but go for it.
It is a big question, but fortunately a simple answer. Russ Kirkpatrick and Andy Kinslow and Joshua Backhoff, our producers, approached me in March of 2019. It seems like that was centuries ago, doesn't it, in 2020? And they said that they had gotten the rights to do a film about the first transgender opera singer to have a leading role on the American stage, and would I be interested in tackling that? And the first answer I gave was, well, first of all, thank you for asking, but 1, I know nothing about opera, and 2, I don't know if I'm qualified to be able to tell the story. Thank you, no thank you. And then they called me back once or twice more and talked me off the ledge and said, you know, you can do this. And I talked to Jonathan about it, and we took John, I want to say, what was it, 2 or 3 weeks? It was very quick.
Really quick.
It was really quick from when we said, yes, we're going to do this to when we're filming. So we had about 2.5 weeks of prep time. And in that time, I said, if we're going to do this, I want to get to know Lucia a little bit. And so we did 3 or 4 Skype calls to try to understand her and her story. And once we did that, I was really comfortable moving forward and had a really clear idea on how I wanted to approach the material, which you saw in the film.
Cool.
I hope that answers your question.
Michael, you take it over, Michael.
You got it. James and John, what impact do you think this film has had and will have on Lucia's life?
Well, I would say, and John, I'd be very curious to hear your opinion on this too. I think that for me as a director, one of the things I was really intrigued with, just purely as an artist, is that I think it captures a moment in an artist's life when you recognize this could be a game changer for you. This is a moment that could be something that shifts the trajectory of what your career has been and what it could potentially be. And that was something that was really intriguing to me as an artist who's also worked for, over a decade. It takes time to create the career and create the life that you want to have. And for Lucia, I thought being able to tell that story just as an artist, not even as a trans story or an LGBT story, but just as an artist, I thought that would be very powerful and perhaps have an opportunity to have a dialogue about that in a way that might be different for an audience that's not experienced with trans stories.
Rachel,
Yeah,
you're an
absolutely.
artist. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Sorry,
Oh, no,
ahead,
sorry,
John.
go ahead.
No,
I was
please
just
go.
going to reiterate what James said. I think he made a really smart decision in not having the focus of the film being her trans identity. I think that, having the focus of the film being her as an artist and as a human being and as a person, I think that was a really smart, creative choice.
Absolutely. Rachel, you're an artist as well. How did this story arc resonate with you watching this this moment of opportunity for Lucia?
It did. It really did. Yeah, I shed some tears actually. There were times where you had her do her reveal, where she was sitting on the stage with the background of the empty seats, and yeah, I'd been through that, coming out, being an established artist, and then suddenly I'm somebody different to the audiences and people I knew, and realizing that ultimately that being trans was just a small piece of who I am. And the biggest part was that the people around me also came to that conclusion. It only took 10 years, but
Right, it only takes time, right?
Yeah.
And that's something, and thank you for sharing that personal experience of yours with us. I felt was so important because I think anytime you're an otherized person in society, right? When people put a label on you or when people decide you are so different or outside of the cultural norms or whatever it is, you're on that stage all the time. You're in that place where you have to present yourself, where you have to almost perform. And I think that being able to tell the story of Lucia as an artist first and use identity as a way to discuss what those issues are and how you present yourself as an artist is the way that you have dialogue about acceptance and understanding, as opposed to constantly putting you on the stage in which people tend to put people that are otherized.
beautiful.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, we, from doing advocacy work here in Arizona in a red state, I know that it's people's stories. It's getting to know the human being beyond just an identity that actually shifts the way that people see us and understand us. Erica, you're a longtime activist here in Arizona. How did this story resonate with you?
Oh, I found it image shattering in many ways. That one thing about this film that's particularly striking is that it is in many ways about voice. And voice is a really big deal for trans women, and a lot of trans women feel a lot of pressure in how they present voice when they go out in the world. And there is a boundary being broken in this film of a trans woman not only being very public in making full, rich use of the voice that she was given and blessed with and developed over time. That that is kind of a boundary breaking of the role of trans women in the world, and that's something I saw was really important about advancing progress for trans people. So I'm curious about that element of the film, about highlighting a trans woman's ability to boldly go out in the world and say, I don't have to accommodate people's impression or interpretation of my gender through voice, that I can be presentable and accepted as a trans woman and address the world as feminine without having to say I have to sacrifice or modify or alter my voice to appease other people.
That was
Yes.
incredibly powerful.
And that, thank you. You eloquently laid out something that I thought was really important with this film. Obviously, that was the first thing that I was intrigued with when they called me about this film, to say that this is an opera singer who kept her baritone voice. And I was really interested in the notions of how voice can be a gender construct. And Lucia presents with her baritone voice this dichotomy for most people when they hear her sing and they look at her. In fact, when you watch the opening of the film, you might note that you hear her before you see her. And that's an intentional choice that John and I kind of talked through in the process of figuring out how we're going to shoot this. How do we open this up in a way that gives the audience that moment of cognitive dissonance to get them past it, to say, okay, there's a talent here, there's a skill here, does that thing even matter at all? Because the voice is so important in the trans community, and to be able to explore how that relationship of self is versus how the public perceives that, it's so unique in the world of opera and music, because it gives you an avenue to really explore that. John, I'm sure you might have some thoughts on that too.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of I think I froze, so I might have missed the entire question, but I think I got the gist of it. Yeah, I think that trying to find a way in the film to separate the voice from the gender was a really a really interesting task in the editing, and I think it paid off really well.
If I could follow that up a little bit, my question is about Tulsa. Tulsa is a very interesting setting for this all to have played out. And I wonder, in the course of making the film, I thought of it one way, wow, how shocking that this would happen in Tulsa. And then I started thinking, well, maybe opera culture is like so staid and traditional in other places that some place like in New York or Chicago where they do that, they are so fixed in the definition of art that they would never be willing to break that boundary. So is this a case of it's shocking that it happened in Tulsa? Or is this a case of that if it were going to happen, it could only happen in Tulsa? Is this like a variation on only Nixon could go to China? It's like only Tulsa could star a trans singer in an opera. Have any thoughts or experience on that in making this film?
You know, it's something that we obviously discussed because Tulsa is kind of a background character in this film, right? And one of the things walking into it, I know John and I had made discussions about, okay, what if there's protests? There weren't. What if there's all of these things that could take place? And they didn't. It was just kind of a dialogue of acceptance within the opera. That is not to say that everyone in Tulsa, Oklahoma accepted the event, to be very clear. But I think what you do see is a shift in that dialogue to say, okay, I may not be on board with this, but I'm not going to sit there and protest like I might have 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And that, I think, is an accomplishment itself. Also, since that event happened, Tulsa has passed inclusivity laws where now you cannot be fired for being trans in the city of Tulsa, which is something that was a direct outcome from this event. But getting back to your initial question about could this have happened in New York and LA or wherever, would this story be as interesting if it was in New York or LA? I'm not convinced it would be because it doesn't have the same, I guess, cultural expectation. Because when you see a city like Tulsa, you expect hellfire and brimstone. And it's interesting, obviously, in the context of this year, because the first Trump rally was also held in Tulsa, Oklahoma. But last year, the first transgender singer in history takes a role on the Tulsa Opera stage. As I've said in a couple of interviews previous, I think that we as a society do a very bad job of defining places as one thing or the other. It's both. And a city like Tulsa can be both. And I think that when we do paint these broad brushes of places in one way or the other, we perhaps do a disservice to the citizens of the city that live there.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah, education and representation matter. Like you said, this opera singer and being in Tulsa had an impact on policy for that city. Film does that too. What do you envision? What changes do you envision that this incredible documentary will bring about? And is that part of why you do documentary? Is that part of why you make films like this?
I mean, for me, the reason I make films is because I love to tell stories that hopefully shift the way that an audience thinks about a subject. It doesn't matter what the subject is. I want to be able to leave you empathetic to the character, to leave you considering something about your own life and perspective, and perhaps change the way you saw something. And in this case, I really wanted to tell a story that doesn't forget the fact that Lucia is trans, because it's obviously a big part of it. But I felt from the start that if we did our job right, as the film progresses, you almost forget the fact that she's trans. Because I find that in media representation, John and I talked about this again so much walking into filming, in trans stories, how many movies about trans people or TV shows about trans people can you think of that aren't about transition? That's what filmmakers and storytellers seem to always come back to. And start going back to the beginning of our conversation, how can we build a society in which people accept people for who they are if we as storytellers are constantly otherizing people into boxes? And I thought it was my responsibility to try to tell a different type of story. And because of the nature of it, I felt like we really had the unique opportunity to do that.
Absolutely. John, how about you?
Yeah, I completely agree. I had mentioned this in a previous interview, but I feel and I hope that this is just the first of many films that start to help normalize these things, because, you know, also being in the LGBT community, I have grown so tired of films where the LGBTQ character is defined by the fact that they're LGBTQ. And that seems to be the only thing that the audience knows about them. And I'm excited for, am I frozen, by the way? I don't know if you guys can see me or not.
You are.
Keep talking, we can hear you.
You can
still
still
hear
hear me?
you.
Okay, I was
Yeah.
like, you guys all froze, and I don't know what's wrong with the internet. Was it
You're
my
back
parents
now.
or just so?
That's great. Anyway.
Did I get cut off at all, or was it?
No,
Did it
No,
all
we
come
heard
through?
you.
We heard
we
you.
can
Okay.
still hear you.
Yeah, just that I got a little off track. I'm excited for films to be able to just integrate LGBTQ characters more and more just as people and not as being defined by that one thing. You know, I think that we're all, you know, complex and an amalgamation of all these different things and creativity and what we do and who we want to be. And I don't think that.
Oops, we may have lost him there.
Yeah, I
Now
think we lost
you.
John.
But I think we got the
Move beyond
gist
that.
of it, but I
There we
understand
go. Yeah.
what John was trying to say, which is true that in
You guys keep
LGBTQ.
freezing. I'm so sorry.
Oh, there you are. You're back again. Are you frozen? But anyway, I know what John was trying to say, which is that LGBTQ characters in films and television are often only represented by their sexuality, by their preferences, by those things, instead of full-bodied characters. And that was something that we really wanted to do here, to treat Lucia like a regular old person, because at the end of the day, if we're not doing that, then we are participating actively in the otherization of people and culture, and that's how people perceive people, unfortunately.
Absolutely.
That's our
Wow.
responsibility as storytellers. I really believe that.
I love that. Erica and Rachel, as trans people, and as a trans person myself, it means a lot to me to see narratives like this. What does it mean to you to see trans people portrayed in film as whole people with complicated, beautiful lives?
Do you want me to go first, Erica?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I think that's the goal because I can tell you in my own experience, when I first transitioned, I would be on stage and I'd see people in the back going, whispering about me. And now I have people just enjoying what I do. And one person even said to me, don't take this the wrong way, but I just remember you as always being who you are. And to me, that was beautiful.
Yeah.
And I'd known them for 20 years beforehand. So,
That's wonderful.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's
like
the
I
goal,
said,
I think.
Yeah, you're right though, that I think the comments you made earlier about how we have to move beyond a world where we're always portrayed in terms of our transition, or
Yeah.
that's the only thing I want to ask about. We're kind of getting better that when news media reports on us, they don't always want to put up a before picture. I've actually had to say to reporters, I want to give you a before picture. That I think all trans people should refuse to present a before picture. And I don't believe you used one in the film. Thank you for that.
We did.
That
You're
we-
right. And
yeah,
I actually told Lucia walking into the film I wasn't going to do that because I said I think it's time for exactly what you're saying, that we stop doing that, because again you're dead naming, you're putting people back in the box. So I'm glad you noticed that, and thank you.
Yeah, but yeah, that's this really important element of progress, is that we have to move to a world where our stories is told that we are trans. We are not defined by what we used to be. We're defined by what we are. Accept us for what we are and show us for what we are. Because a lot of part the obsession with presenting our transition because it's sensational has obscured so many other issues in our lives that just get ignored when we tell our stories. And that transition experience with something that kind of fades back into our memory is not front and center in our lives, and the things the issues that are really affecting our lives don't get addressed well enough. So yes, thank you for taking a documentary on that says here's the experience of a trans person in the real world, in real life, and trying to journey out into the world, the greater society, and presenting themselves openly and honestly for what they are, as opposed to just repeating into some trans community space. That how they interact with the world, I think, is really important in filmmaking. Thank you.
Right.
Absolutely. James and John, how have audiences reacted to the film?
Well, it's interesting, obviously, releasing a film in the middle of COVID-19. It's been hard to see exactly how audiences have responded because so many of our events have been virtual. But I do know that we've gotten some really positive reviews, and the audiences that we've interacted with have had some really, really kind things to say. Remarks from people like yourself really mean the world to us. Because that is really who I wanted to make this film for, people that don't see themselves represented. And even at the beginning of this, where I said I wasn't sure if I should do this, the question always becomes, as a filmmaker, I think, can you put yourself in someone else's shoes? I can't walk in them, but I can empathize. And if I can empathize and try to understand the process, then hopefully I can communicate something to an audience that will resonate. And so for me, the highest honor is really hearing from members of the trans community to say this is something they haven't seen before, and then hopefully to move beyond the trans community to people that don't understand the trans experience, and then maybe they can watch this film and see the trans community a different light. I think that if we can do those two things, then I will feel as though we set out to do what we said we'd do.
Right.
John, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, it's it's been weird. I've been only hearing responses through like virtual Q&As and what James has told me. So, but everything seems to be really positive. I think we're definitely moving in the right direction. But I will be very curious to hear, if we're able to get to a point where we can screen it for people that aren't actively involved with LGBTQ community to see how they respond. I think that'll be a real testament to see how it reaches out to a broader audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Did anything surprise you all about the making of the film or the watching of the film? Did anything stand out to you? We've already named a few things. I think it stands out to every trans person that you don't dead name, your main character, your main actor, that you don't use photographs from the past, all of that sort of stuff. That stands out to us. Did anything else stand out to you all or surprise you?
I was surprised. I know James kind of touched on this earlier. I was particularly surprised by Tulsa itself. I know we talked a little bit about this, but I definitely had a stereotype, unfortunately going in of what I was expecting to see and, protests and all that stuff, but it was incredibly open as far as what we experienced, that we didn't really experience any blatant backlash or anything like that. I mean, I think Tobias kind of mentions in the film that maybe there will be silent backlash, but I was genuinely surprised by what a beautiful and open place it was.
Just as an Oklahoman, Tulsa is the most liberal town, if you can imagine. They have the only LGBT community center in the entire state, and I heard my cousin Karina said that the rest of the cast was just a production as normal. They just kept it going, and it was fabulous. I do have a little question about the artistry because I'm a theater person myself. Do you know? Did the director at the theater, did he conceive to have this play be a cross-dressing play, I suppose, a Don Juan? Don Juan was a crazy-ass character, right? Did he choose to, had he already made that choice before he cast Lucia, or did her trans situation create the concept?
The answer to that would be she, actually, Denny Sayers, who directed the show. It's totally fine. Tobias Picker, of course, is the artistic director of the company. And then there's Denny Sayers, who's the director of the show. And Denny and Lucia came up with that concept together in London in advance of doing the show, I believe, in January of that year. And that was something they discussed. It's one of the things, obviously, that's quite interesting about the production itself, because, of course, our film is a show within a show within a show, right? It's very meta. It's very meta in a lot of ways. And that was something that I know John and I and the rest of our crew were really interested in that creative choice to go between those two things. Because for those of you that may or may not be familiar with the story of Don Giovanni as being a sexual predator of Don Juan, there's a lot of rhetorical load in that creative choice for an audience. It's a huge decision, and I was fascinated with it as well.
Great, thank you.
Could I ask about Tulsa as a character in the story? That I kind of saw this film as like a love letter to Tulsa. That it made the city. I mean, I had the same stereotypes. I drove across country a couple of years ago, and I drove through Tulsa, and I drove through Tulsa. I did not want to stop there. I was afraid if I had to get gas or get a snack or something, otherwise Red as Trans would be a dangerous place for me to be. And after seeing this film, I'm thinking, Tulsa might be a nice place to live. I mean, that's a pretty big transition. And and so I'm at times I was wondering, is this a story of Lucia doing Don Giovanni in Tulsa, or is it a case of Tulsa as seen through the eyes of Lucia while doing Don Giovanni? And I was curious how much was the goal of the film really to cast it in its very best light? Was it a love story to Tulsa, or when here's your chance, blow your own horn, was it just really good cinematography?
Well, I would argue it's really good cinematography. I think that's all on John. I don't think that we intentionally were making a love letter to Tulsa. To be clear, I love Tulsa as well, just as much as John. And so I certainly think that it is kind of a character in the background. And I felt that it's not hard to portray it in a good light when there was nothing to negate that story. There's not really a story there that shows otherwise, right? And so I think that John did a remarkable job, as he always does. He shot almost all of my films for a very long time. And he did a great job of capturing the unique design, the architecture, the Art Deco, and really we wanted to lean into all of that because I'll let John talk about this further, but one of those first decisions we made walking into to the film is that this is a story about opera. This is a story about theater. This doesn't need to feel like a gritty documentary. This needs to feel like it's a narrative feature film, that every shot's composed, every decision is specific. And we were fortunate that our producer really gave us those remarkable locations when we asked for them to do that. I'll let John talk about it from there.
Yeah, as far as Tulsa itself goes, we never had any conversations about like avoiding certain parts of Tulsa or trying to hide some like ugliness that was there. I think we just tried our best to capture it for what it was, and you know, show off things about the city that I think many people outside of that area probably don't even know are there. Like I had no idea that there was this huge Art Deco architectural element to the city. But going to the overall design of the film, that was something going in because something going in that James and I talked about, because neither of us really had any true understanding about what opera was. I mean, I had an idea of what I thought opera was from growing up, that it was kind of this stuffy, you know, highfalutin thing that only happens in, you know, Italy or something. I think I kind of had the stereotype that most people have about opera. So I was really excited with James to kind of go in and dive in and learn more about what it was. But as he mentioned, with it being about our performing art and about theater and opera specifically, we wanted to take the approach of doing something that did feel more composed and more inherently cinematic and beautiful versus just handheld running around grabbing this and that. So one of the rules that we set out for ourselves at the beginning was, unless we were in a position where we were forced to, where it was either you get the moment or you lose the moment, we always did everything in a controlled way. We tried to our best to avoid handheld, again, unless we were in a position where we had to just get a moment. But you know, in moments where we, like the interviews where we could control the image, we tried to light it like we would a film. We tried to be very cinematic in our approach.
Cool. Where is Lucia today and the other folks in the film? What are they up to now?
That's a good question. Lucia is actually performing a show right now in Germany, believe it or not, in October 2020. That she is performing a show in Germany. Tobias, they are doing a opera in the baseball field this week as well in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And the cast, I mean, it's the cast of the film is really a top level group of people in the world of opera. Like John said, neither of us knew anything about opera walking into this, and which was one of the reasons I almost didn't do it. It was scary, and I wanted to treat that world with respect. And we were just so lucky to have an international cast of real veterans to really learn about the process of opera. I mean, when you have Tobias Picker, who's one of the most prolific composers of opera in the world right now, to teach you that, it's a really remarkable experience. So yes, all of them are doing quite well. Lucia is supposed to debut at the Met, depending on what happens with COVID, so keep your fingers crossed.
Wow.
Definitely. Wow. Well,
That'll be
James
great.
and John, I think everyone would agree that your film gives so much respect and does a wonderful service for the world of opera and for Lucia and for the trans community. Where can people follow the film and follow the progress? Are there social media accounts and places where we can keep in touch with the film?
Yes, you can follow us at The Sound of Identity on Facebook, Instagram. You can follow me at jameskickwriter.com. You can find me on Facebook, all of those places. The film, myself and John, you'll be able to find updates on that on the internet for sure. The best thing you can do is tell your friends about it, to like those pages, because this is going to be a very much slow burn rollout with everything going out in our world right now. We're slowly staggering it out. So the more people that know about it, that watch the trailer, that share it with a friend, that's the best thing you can do. So please do that for us. I'd really appreciate it.
I just want to note, have you been able to show it to an audience, a live audience?
Only one. We did a live screen. Well, we did some test audiences, but it's not the same thing. We did a live audience in Macon, Georgia at the Macon Film Festival, a socially distant event. And that was really remarkable for me on a personal level because they programmed my first student film when I was a student filmmaker years ago. So it was a really nice full circle moment in a weird year. And that was really great. So that was a nice experience, but that's the only one I've had so far. So I hope you all send good energy to not only just COVID ending, but more audiences being able to see things in person. It's so important, not just for our film, but for many others.
Absolutely.
Great. Great. So if I can maybe try to wrap this up a little bit, wonderful conversations, wonderful things to think about. Thank you so much, all of you. Thank you, my friends from the trans community here in Arizona. Thank you to the Desperado Film Festival for making this happen. Thank you to James and to John for being able to be with us. I also want to thank our sponsors, our main sponsors for this film, Equality Arizona, who Michael is the executive director for, the Phoenix Pride organization, which is a great supporter, Paradise Valley Community College, where normally we would be holding this event. And then we want to thank the Maricopa Community College's Foundation, who's also a large supporter and helps us with LGBTQ scholarships here in Arizona. And, you know, we're very, very excited about all the work we get to do here. Maybe we can show the film in person at some point in time, you know, bring it in. That would be really fabulous. I
Well, we
appreciate
would
it.
love to do
Yeah.
that. And I would also like to say, tagging off of what you said, thank you to all of those sponsors for doing this, because this is not an easy time. And films like ours are totally indebted to the patronage of organizations like all of those you mentioned. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for spending time to do that so we can share it with audiences.
Okay, great. Well, I think this has been fabulous. So Alan, I'll give it over to you now.
That's it. As the programmer for the festival, I just want to say thank you for doing this, and we're excited to have the screening in the next couple weeks. So we're going to try to promote it and get as many people to buy those tickets online as we can, and we're going to include this and see how it goes. But thank you so much.
Of course.
Appreciate it.
Great.
One of the cool things about all this is anybody in Arizona can watch it. So that's a
Right.
good thing, you know?
Absolutely.
That's I've been telling that to some people that it's kind of, it's a weird time, but that's a unique opportunity we have
Mhm.
this year. So fingers crossed. Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. No
Yeah,
problem.
thank
Good
you.
luck with the film. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Thank you
Bye,
everyone.
guys.
Thanks,
Bye.
Great to be with
Be
you.
well. Stay healthy.